Now on our roundtable, joined by Christie, Donna Brazil, New York Times Washington correspondent Maggie Haberman, and Julie Pace, the new executive editor of the Associated Press. Chris, let me begin with you. You heard Janet Yellen there say she wishes the debt limit would go away. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon, but this cycle is getting ridiculous.
Well, a couple of things. I think first, I agree with the Secretary in this respect. This should be an argument we're having regarding spending up front, not paying the debt after you do the spending. And I think that Congress on both sides of the aisle have failed to do that over the last number of years. Certainly that happened in the Obama administration, happened in the Trump administration, and it's happening in the Biden administration. But secondly, there's all this talk about people wanting bipartisanship. But there have been two examples, George, of when Republicans have actually come over to help Democrats on issues. You've had the infrastructure bill in the Senate, where you had 19 Republican senators come with the Democrats, and now you had the debt ceiling, where 10 came to extend the debt ceiling. And both times, Democratic leadership has smacked back at Republicans. On the infrastructure bill, a vote was promised by Nancy Pelosi, and she broke that promise. And now, right after the 10 votes, Chuck Schumer goes to the floor to absolutely excoriate the Republican Party. If we want to encourage bipartisanship, after people actually do it, kicking them in the face is not the way to get them to want to do it again. And what Chuck Schumer did this week is going to make December 3rd a much deeper crisis. It's a sign of his immaturity, and it's a sign of his own concern about his own left and his own primary next year.
You can argue about whether he should have given the speech, but do you really think that's why Mitch McConnell is saying he's not going to provide?
No, what it does politically, it makes it easier for him to do it. If Chuck Schumer had gone out on that floor and made a gracious speech, where he said, I want to thank the 10 Republicans who came over here and did it. The rest of you are irresponsible, but you 10, you did something great for the country. He's now made it easy for McConnell to send that letter and easy for Republicans to now say, to hell with you. Now you got all the time you want, you do it.
Chris, it's too early to send a Valentine card to Mitch McConnell or anybody else because, look, the truth is that 97% of the debt occurred before Joe Biden took office. Let's look at it as simple people. If you and I went out and had a good meal, from appetizers to dessert and hopefully some wine, because you're taking me out, right?
Right, I mean,
can you imagine two of us getting up and walking out without paying the tab?
Absolutely
That's
not.
what's going on with this debt ceiling.
But Donna,
that's the issue, Chris.
But you know what? If you
put it over, the national interest should be above the petty partisan fights that we have every day.
It should be. But you know what? If you had said to me, I'm going to split the bill with you 50-50, I wouldn't then kick you all the way to the door and call you cheap and say you were no good. And that's what Chuck Schumer did. My point is, Republicans did what they had to do. 10 Republicans came over, did the procedural vote, and in return, what Chuck Schumer said is, you're awful.
Julie Pace, I want to bring you in on this. Janet Yellen says she's pretty confident Democrats are going to solve this in December, but she's still resisting this idea that somehow the administration just takes this off the table.
I think this is really emblematic of the Biden administration's approach to so many of the things before them right now. They want Washington to work. They want to work through the proper channels. They firmly believe that this is Congress's responsibility. And so even when they look toward December, where it's hard to imagine that we don't end up right back in this exact same place, they really don't want to signal that they're going to take extraordinary measures. If we get into that situation and we don't have Republicans who are going to step forward to try to help them get this over the finish line, it is certainly possible they would have to go to some of these tools, but Joe Biden's position always is going to be, this is Congress's responsibility, and I want Washington to work, even when the evidence is that Washington is not working.
Maggie, we're certainly seeing that on the negotiations of the Build Back Better plan as well. You saw Janet Yellen right there. The administration doesn't want to come in and say, here's our best plan, take this.
No, Biden is leaving all options open in a number of different fronts. And as Julie says, he's an institutionalist. He does not want to blow up what we have seen happen in Congress for many, many, many decades. And I understand that. I think the challenge for them is going to be, is this a really different moment, as a number of Democrats believe that it is? Is this an extraordinary time, as Democrats candidly have said over and over again for the last 5 years? What we heard throughout the Trump era was, this is an extraordinary time. This is a reason for extraordinary measures. Biden himself talked about that to some extent. I mean, he also offered olive branches to Republicans, but I do think that there is a meet between what Democrats have been saying and the realities of this moment. We're going
and I want to take that to Donna Brazil, because Donna, I mean, maybe I'm a creature of my own times, thinking back to the 1990s, but $2 trillion would still be a massive victory for Joe Biden and the Democrats.
Huge. Yeah, over 10 years. Look, President Biden is negotiating with multiple Democrats. I think it's time the Democrats come together, figure out the scale and scope of what it is that we are asking the American people to pay for, and just take this opportunity to rebuild the middle class, to strengthen our economy, and to go big and go home. This argument each and every day about the money, the sausage making, that's one of the reasons why people are losing respect for what's happening in Washington. They don't want to hear about all of the sausage making.
Chris,
they want to know what's on the menu.
Chris, do you think the Democrats get this done, and how much difference will it make in protecting them in the midterms?
I think they will get something done. I just think it's impossible to think that they'll walk away, like you said, from $1.5 trillion or $2 trillion. I mean, it's incredible. I don't go back as far as the 90s thinking about this. I just go back to President Obama when he did an $800 billion recovery package in the midst of a much worse economy than what we're dealing with right now. Everyone said it was outlandish and crazy, and now they're walking away from $1.5 to $2 trillion, more than 2 times that. They won't walk away from it. There will be a deal that'll be made here eventually. But whether it will protect them in the midterms or not, George, I'm very skeptical about that, because I don't think that the American people are going to be able to see whatever results they think they're going to get from this. They won't see it in time for November of 2022. And there's going to be a whole bunch of other things going on here. COVID, will it still be around or not? How will he be seen as being effective on that? 194,000 jobs this week. Not exactly what people were expecting. And if those things don't improve, no matter what they vote for and what numbers attached to it, they're going to have problems in 2020.
This is the big challenge for Biden. He's going to spend this whole year fighting to get some package finished, and the top line number will be really massive. But a lot of that spending is not going to be implemented next year. So he's going to be out there trying to argue for why he spent this time focused on this issue. And a lot of Americans won't have felt concrete benefits of it. And that is a really difficult messaging challenge for them right now. And I do think that they have to worry about this going into the midterms next year. How will Americans feel about what they benefited from all of this sausage making that we've seen in Washington?
And Maggie, he's fighting for it at a time when the president's poll numbers now dip below 40% for the first time this week.
Yeah, look, I mean, he is facing significant headwinds. Now, that could change. Look, there's a very, as you know, narrow majority for Democrats. This was always going to be a tough fight next year, but I do think that there has been a convergence of factors that have made this much harder for Biden. Seeing independents drift away from him has been a huge problem. I don't know that they can recoup this enough toward next year, and this is where the fact that Biden sort of has a foot in each camp ideologically within the Democratic Party in Congress with what he's fighting for right now, that is also a challenge. It may end up that he can triangulate that, but it's tricky.
I know the media wants to distract from the Biden administration's failed agenda by focusing on one day in January. They want to use that one day to try and demean the character and intentions of 74 million Americans. For our part, I truly believe we all ought to remain completely focused on the future.
Mike Pence talking about one day in January when his life was in danger. Of course, that was January 6th as he maneuvers for a possible run in 2024. I want to talk about that here on our roundtable. But Maggie Haberman, as our resident Trump expert, let me begin with you. We saw the president in Iowa, former president in Iowa last night, making no pretense about wanting to run again.
I mean, I think what you're going to hear him do is some strange dance between talking about the future, make America great again, and his sloganeering, but he can't stop talking about the past. And that's the one thing that I think is striking about Pence's statement, which we should note. I think that people are focused on January 6th because January 6th was a horrible day, not because they're trying to demean Trump supporters, but Trump is focused on looking backwards to a degree that his party does not want him to. But many members of his party, not everybody, many members of his party are not willing to say to him, this is not the way forward. Pence is not saying it directly to him. I think the number of voices who are willing to do that have so far been very few.
Julie Pace, not only not willing to say it to him, I was struck yesterday, Chuck Grassley, senior senator from Iowa, at 88 years old, he's running again for the Senate. He criticized the insurrection of January 6th, but was standing there front and center with the president yesterday as he talked about the election fraud and the election lies.
Kim Reynolds as well, the Republican governor of Iowa. I mean, this is a party that is not only not willing to say to Trump, stop talking about January 6th or the election, they're openly embracing him as he does that, as he continues to peddle false information, lies about what happened in the election. They are standing with him because they know that he is reflective of where the base of the party is right now. And I think if Trump, does continue this dance moving forward, he's going to continue to hold other Republicans on the sidelines who would like to maybe get out there and challenge for the nomination. But he's also going to continue to keep that part of the party mobilized and alive and believing, again, in an event that didn't happen. That election was free and fair, and Joe Biden won. And Trump continues to keep a lot of Americans believing otherwise.
Is he winning this fight?
I don't think so. Because I think that any politician, good politician, experienced politician knows that every election is about tomorrow, not about yesterday. And so the idea that somehow the 2024 election is going to be about 2020 in any way, to me, is just not going to happen. Now, it also is true that we are not yet 9 months away from Donald Trump leaving office. We're just 9 months away from January 6th. And we have this instant gratification society that wants everything done and cleaned up and finished now. That's not the way life works. Anything that's worth doing is worth work, and work is going to take time. And that's what's going to happen inside the Republican Party. It's going to take time for this to be done. And I'm glad to be able to say that last night, I didn't watch the rally. Like most normal Americans, I was watching Texas A&M beat Alabama last night, which I think was much more newsworthy to most Americans than a rally by a former president in an early caucus state.
Donna, meanwhile, Chris is talking about the timeline. It's pretty clear that one of the things we're seeing going on with this whole January 6th investigation, this invocation of executive privilege, trying to stall, is to try to figure out a way to prevent that investigation from being completed before the midterms so Republicans come back in control.
Delay. That is the tactic that we're going to see over and over again as Steve Bannon, of all people, basically says, Donald Trump says, I have executive privilege. Well, if he has executive privilege, you have it, I have it, we all have it. I mean, the guy wasn't even working in the White House during the January 6th insurrection. Look, the Democrats are going to go hard on this, along with the Republicans who are on that committee. They're not going to allow Mr. Trump and the others to obstruct Congress. They're going to take this, if necessary, to the floor and get a criminal citation. I look at you not for criminal, but because you're my lawyer here. No, baby, I got you. But a criminal contempt? I mean, George, is a split screen. You got the Democratic Party trying to save the country, create 5 million jobs over the last 8 months, trying to help this economy, and you got the Republicans in this denial. It is King Donald Trump, who will not concede. That was the biggest line last night, Chris. 90 minutes, I know, Alabama, I agree with you, but 90 minutes of just going over and over again. He hates Mitch McConnell. He hates Joe Biden. He hates Kamala Harris. He wants to run against Stacey Abrams. And, oh, by the way, George, you'll like this one. He wants Iowa, the caucuses, to go first again.
Well, I'm going to come back to you on the Democrats on that.
Let me just say one thing real quick on this. Again, the one area that bothers me is that when there was a commission that tried to be set up, and Nancy Pelosi decided that certain members of the Republican Party weren't allowed to be on the committee, she makes it easy at times, Donna, for Republicans to do that. If, in fact, she had permitted McCarthy, as is always the case, as you know, for the minority leader to put on the members that he wanted to put on, you wouldn't have President Trump being able to say the things he's saying about Liz Cheney or about the others on the committee. And so part of it is they say they want bipartisanship, but only bipartisanship on their terms.
Let me bring that to Maggie Haberman. Part of the counter argument to that is that the people that Kevin McCarthy wanted to appoint were explicit about wanting to subvert the work of the committee.
Right. I think there's a third way here, so to speak, George, which is that I think if Democrats had moved faster, and it's hard not to look back at this and wonder, if they had moved faster on a commission, a select committee, closer to the actual event, would there have still been more energy? Would it have been easier to get Republicans on board because there was still so much intensity around it? I do think think that the intensity around it has diminished it. I think that for those of us in the media and those of us who were either in Washington that day, which I was not, or colleagues who were, experienced it differently than, say, the average American. And so I think in the public consciousness it has changed.
And part of that shows, Julie Pace, the hold that Donald Trump still has over the party.
Because it is remarkable. To Maggie's point, there was a moment coming out of January 6th where you had Republicans who really did feel like Trump had pushed this too far, like he needed to not just leave office, but he needed to be pushed aside. The way in which that dynamic has shifted has been really remarkable this year.
Can I just say one thing, too? I was thinking about this when Donna was talking about, you know, there's going to be an effort to try to get a criminal referral. And I don't know then what DOJ does, right? So if you're Donald Trump, and we've watched him do this over and over, he is always going to push to see how far he can get away with something. And at a certain point, if people are sticking by rules that generally go to a point but don't really, you know, end in a measure in accountability, then the lesson that he takes and that his supporters take is, see, I can just do this again next time. And that's the thing. But it's two separate conversations going on. And at the end of the day, he is trying to set this up where, you know, he wins either way. I don't think that's necessarily true, but that's how he's
It's going to be a real test, though, for Merrick Garland. Christie, let me put this to you. He's been resistant to inject the Justice Department in a lot of these battles, although this week he did, and the president did make it clear that they were not going to abide by these executive privilege claims. Is it conceivable to you that Merrick Garland would actually act on a criminal referral of this?
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, I think what the Justice Department has to get back to, and it hasn't been there for quite some time, in my view, not just in this administration or in the last one, but in the one before that. I don't think the Justice Department has been what it's needed to be since the Bush 43 administration. You need to look at the facts, and you need to make a decision based on the facts and the law and act. And if you do so consistently with the law, most of the American people will respect you. And I think it's what Merrick Garland's got to decide to do. And I think, you know, he hurt himself this week with some of the stuff he's doing regarding parents and education. It makes him look partisan. I think he needs to get back to what the Justice Department is supposed to do, which is dispassionately look at the facts like they did after 9/11, like the Ashcroft Justice Department did then. And I think that's the way they have to go and do it. And if he does it that way, then he has an opportunity to do something important for the country.
Chris, no teacher should be threatened simply because he or she is trying to do their job. No school board member.
It depends on what you call a threat, Donna. Parents standing up for what they want is not a threat.
A threat is when you verbally assault someone and threaten their lives, which is happening across this country.
And you know what, Donna?
And I'm so glad the Justice Department decided to take a position.
Well, let me just say this. The Justice Department can individually, in each U.S. Attorney's Office, investigate those things. We don't need broad political pronouncements from the White House and the Justice Department. It politicizes the Justice Department.
It's a continuation of January 6th, and we should not allow that to happen.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.